Max Verstappen has skyrocketed to public stardom these past 2 seasons, and rightfully so, as the young Red Bull driver had to beat out the 7-time world champion to win his first title in 2021, and had a dominant season in 2022 to win his second title. So it isn't a surprise that every media outlet and fan of the sport are clinging to every word he says, searching for the next soundbite. And this past week has been filled with controversial statements from the 2-time world champion. But before we get to what Max has had to say this past week, consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss out on our latest uploads. Now that's out of the way, let's get to it. The biggest highlight of Max's 2022 season, aside from the obvious, was the incident at the Brazilian Grand Prix where Max had disobeyed team orders. And in doing so, former F1 legend Joachim Stuck claims that Verstappen's actions may have breached the first commandment on his team's wish list. To refresh everyone's memory of the incident, Verstappen was asked by the team to give his position to his teammate Sergio Perez to help his cause in finishing over Ferrari's Charles Leclerc in the Drivers' Championship. After the race, Verstappen went into a tirade on the team radio defending his actions and saying why he ignored team orders. Speaking to Eurosport Germany, Stuck would say, "From my point of view, it had to do with a lack of discipline. The first commandment in Formula 1 is to follow the team's instructions unconditionally, because the drivers have signed a contract." Stuck would add that he would have handed Verstappen a hefty penalty if he were at the helm at Red Bull. Something Red Bull's team boss Christian Horner didn't do, but instead praised both Verstappen and Perez for quickly clearing the air after Interlagos. They're both pretty grown-up individuals, and they both have an open relationship with each other. So when, if ever, there is an issue, it gets discussed, it gets put on the table, and you talk it through. I think communication is always the best way to deal with any issue, and Sergio is an experienced guy. He's been around a long time. He's a very rounded guy, and Max is very much a straight shooter as well, and the two of them have always enjoyed a decent relationship, and I just see that continuing. It isn't a secret to anyone with a pair of eyes that Max is the main at Red Bull, but Checo being the competitor that he is still hopeful of being a world champion with the Milton Keynes team, which is what many believe Max was alluding to when he talked about second drivers, where he warned that anyone who does not accept their role will have their careers end early. Every year he starts fresh, Verstappen said of Bottas, but after a few races you realize it's not going to happen again and you accept your role. He still finished on podiums, he won a few races and took pole positions. You just have to accept that the driver next to you is just a bit better. That's fine, that can happen. It's important that he accepted it. Some drivers can do that and then it goes completely wrong. Then they don't survive for very long. I'm not going to name names, but you have to accept your role. You can't live in a fairy tale world. Another thorn in Verstappen's side is the arrival of Daniel Ricciardo. When Max arrived at Red Bull, Daniel was seen as one of the best drivers on the grid, but the team chose youth, which didn't sit well with Daniel, which ultimately led to him leaving the team. "When I think of teammates, I definitely think of Max," Ricciardo told Maxim in May this year when asked about his previous teammates before Lando Norris at McLaren. "He's the first one that comes to mind because he's the longest teammate I've had in Formula 1. I think we pushed each other for better or worse. Whether it was a heated rivalry or a respected intensity, we got the best out of each other. We both thrived off it. Teammate is a very interesting term for it," he added. That's what they are, but they're not really mates when you're teammates. So, like with Max, sure, we had a rivalry, but I think we always respected each other. But there was a bit of a lid on our relationship as teammates. But when I then moved on from Red Bull, and I felt like because we weren't directly competing with each other, we were actually able to form a better relationship. I think we just really respected when it was, and then we moved on, and we were just a little bit more easier to get along with. After the debacle at Interlagos, Verstappen voiced his disdain for how the media writes about him and his actions, and said that the media aspect of Formula 1 will inevitably be the reason he leaves the sport. These kinds of people never come up to you to say these things straight to your face, because they're sitting behind their desks, angry and frustrated. They can write whatever they want, because the platforms allow it, said Verstappen. And recently, Max would share his thoughts about retirement, Max would point out that Fernando Alonso, who is still competing in the sport at the ripe age of 41, isn't something he's looking to do with his career. He is fast and he's still very motivated, he explained. Every time I talk to him, it's like talking to a 30-year-old who is still in the middle of his career. He loves it. That's why he's doing it. And when asked whether or not he sees himself still racing when he reaches his 40s, Verstappen would respond with, "Definitely not. Not in Formula One. Who knows what else," he claimed. "But I definitely want to do endurance at some point. Maybe still a few more years, 2 or 3 years until I want to do that." And there you have it, guys. So what do you think of everything that has been happening with Max lately? Let us know in the comments section below. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't.